Hey, Diva family. We're going to get in the psychedelic time machine and travel back to the early days of the psychedelic movement. Today's guest is Dr. Marsha Rosenbaum, one of the founding contributors, or OGs, of the world of psychedelic education. I'm not sure what year I first met Marsha, but it was either the late 90s or 2000. She was a presenter at a one-day psychedelic event at the Universalist Church in San Francisco.
Mm.
These were the deeply underground days of psychedelics. So the fact that people were talking publicly about psychedelic use was exciting in a forbidden kind of way. I saw Marsha at many events over the years, including the first of its kind MDMA conference in 2001 that she helped produce in San Francisco, as well as the 2019 Psychedelics and Integration Conference at Esalen. We recently connected at a private event honoring the legacy of Stan Groff, and I invited her on the podcast. So let me tell you about her professional background. Marsha Rosenbaum, PhD, earned her doctorate in medical sociology at the University of California, San Francisco. For nearly 20 years, she was the principal investigator on grants from the National Institute on Drug Abuse to study women heroin addicts, cocaine, methadone maintenance treatment, and MDMA. She is Director Emerita of the Drug Policy Alliance in San Francisco, where she founded the Safety First Drug Education Project. Marsha's publications include Pursuit of Ecstasy, The MDMA Experience, and Safety First, a reality-based approach to teens and drugs, as well as numerous scholarly articles and opinion pieces. Marsha, thank you so much for being on Psychedelic Divas. It is an honor.
Thank you, Carl. I'm happy to be here.
So I want to start at your beginning. Walk us through how you first got involved doing drug research.
I first got involved in drug research in 1972. I had just gotten a master's degree in sociology at San Francisco State and was included in a research project at the Institute for Scientific Analysis on, we called it the Odyssey, the heroin Odyssey study. It was 2001 heroin addicts who were in treatment at the time.
But not 2001.
No. There were 2001 subjects.
Okay, got it.
And they were at a facility, I think it was in Kentucky. And so one of the inmates there, I guess you called it that then, started to interview people coming in. And there were 500 women in this population. And when we began to analyze the data later, I got the women. And so that's...
And you're working with NIDA at this point.
The grant was
who's doing this?
The grant was from NIDA.
NIDA, okay.
Yeah. And so it was, I analyzed, it was a quantitative study. I analyzed the 500 women and wrote a paper about that and presented it at the American Sociological Association meetings at the time. And a woman who was a staff at NIDA came up to me and she says, we don't know much about women heroin addicts. And so would you be open to writing a grant proposal to do a study of women heroin addicts? And remember, this is way back now, 1977 or 78. And so, sure. And so I wrote, with the help of, colleagues, I wrote a grant, and that was my own NIDA study of women heroin addicts. It started in 1977. And so that was how I first got into research. And when you have the privilege of having a grant, and for me, what a privilege it was. By this time, I was in a PhD program and ready to do my dissertation. And so that study, Women on Heroin, became my dissertation topic. And that's how I got in. And if you talk to other researchers, you find that it's a nice way to make a living. And so one grant begets another one and another one and another one. So that's how I got in. I got in through heroin and then women on heroin and then methadone maintenance and methadone for a really long time, the various parts of methadone maintenance. And then in the middle of that, I got a grant to do the first sociological ethnographic study of MDMA, which started this now or a little later in 1987. And so that's my research background.
Well, let's go back to heroin, your gateway drug, so to speak. In your research with women on heroin, you offered a sympathetic but controversial view of people who use drugs, especially stigmatized women who used heroin and crack, and some of them were pregnant. So, how did you come to that perspective, that sympathetic perspective, and how did that perspective fly with NIDA?
Came to that perspective by talking to women and listening to their stories and their life histories. And it was kind of difficult to come away with any other perspective other than a sympathetic view of their struggles. And so that's that. And we just presented it that way. And NIDA didn't seem to mind because they kept funding us. So, yeah, I think, and I've learned so much from those women whose lives were so different from mine. And it was, we asked ourselves, my team of researchers, why, why are they opening up to us? And the reason was that we connected with them on one really important part of their lives and ours, and that was the kids, their kids,
Mm-hmm.
our kids, and their struggles to keep their kids and how to, now these days we call it parenting, but then you didn't, but how to parent when you have a drug problem. How does that work? So that's how we came away with that perspective. It's always all about listening. And as sociologists, that's what we're trained to do. So that's what we did.
Well, you told me you first took MDMA in 1985, right before it became illegal. And you were at the time you were writing that grant proposal that you mentioned to study it, and you thought, well, we should probably take it and see what it's all about.
Yeah.
And then as you mentioned, you received NIDA funding to study MDMA, and your results showed that it was not the demon drug the government feared, and actually helped people who used it.
Yeah.
So, what was the impact of that study, and what was NIDA's response?
We never got funding for MDMA research again. They we tried, and
A little too sympathetic this time.
we just couldn't come up with a perspective that MDMA needed to be feared. And so yeah, so we tried to do a follow-up, I thought we wrote a very good proposal.
I'm sure it was.
But nope, not no. Now, had we been looking at some drug that they considered problematic, and so did we, that would have been different. So,
Well, this was the 80s. This was Reagan, Nancy Reagan, just say no. So that was certainly the perspective and the energy with which you were putting these proposals forth to the National Institute of Drug Abuse. So I can see why they were rejecting these very thoughtful, well-written proposals. I think their proposal was possibly overriding that. All right, so you spent 20 years at NIDA. Tell us how you moved from drug research into drug policy reform.
those of us doing research on especially opioids and treatment as well, knew that for many, if not most of the users we were interviewing, the main problem was the illegality of the drugs they were using. Now, had they been, habituated with alcohol, it would have been a different story. But these people had to deal with the criminal justice system regularly. And so it was obvious to us, those sociologists like me, that what we needed to do was look at the drug laws in this country and try and figure out a way to switch the thinking from criminal justice to health and healthcare. So at that time, there was an organization, this is 1988 now, an organization I'd heard about called the Drug Policy Foundation out of DC. And it was researchers and lawyers and doctors and sociologists and just basically professionals who thought that the war on drugs was doing more harm than good. And so I was very attracted to that organization and started going to their conferences and learned so much about what was going on in terms of the drug war itself and how we could think about changing that perspective. So that's how I switched over. Plus, I had been studying methadone and other drugs for years, and it was enough. It was, and it was the frustration with the government not heeding our recommendations specifically about methadone. It just was too frustrating. And I found the anti-drug war movement very, very exciting. Very. So that's when I switched.
Well, I like that you found the anti-drug movement more exciting. You had mentioned that you still have in your kitchen an old bumper sticker from the Drug Policy Foundation. Drugs are bad. The drug war is worse.
Right. Yeah. It's
Which
still
is
bad.
that's where we were at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're still there, but I don't think we're at the first part. Drugs are bad. We're like, no, actually, the drug war was terrible, and drugs are actually good. I think that's the new bumper sticker.
Well, they can be.
Some drugs can be very helpful. How about that? It's a much longer bumper sticker. So you mentioned so you're in the drug policy reform world. So let's talk about the politics of that. So you mentioned that you had that Gavin Newsom came in early on, this well before he was governor, and you were interacting with him. Tell us a little bit about that journey with him and other politicians.
Well, there's a backstory here about how I wanted to use my resources to connect with politicians, at how to use my resources to get access to them, just to have face time, not on a computer. I mean, real face
Right.
time. And
it's pre-digital, people.
yeah, this was before that. And so I really, was focused on having people in power understand what was going on and what the problem was and how we could fix it. Now, the Gavin story comes a little bit in the middle of all this. And remember, he wasn't who he is now.
No.
He was
he was the mayor first. Well, he was
before that,
supervisor.
He was a supervisor
in San Francisco.
So this is 1998. And I had read in the paper that he was proposing an amendment to methadone policy, which would allow patients to get their methadone not simply by going to clinics, but through their own private physicians.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was great. So that prompted me to write, as a methadone researcher, my first op-ed. And so it appeared in the Chronicle, and the title was "Another Look at Methadone Maintenance," where I applauded Supervisor Newsom then at the time. So he must have read it, because he called me up and he says, "Thank you very much for that piece." And he said, "Who are you?" So then back to him, I said, "Well, I told him who I was. I was a researcher in San Francisco." And I said, "Who are you?" And because
Yeah.
who'd have heard of this guy? And he says, "Well, let's get together." And he came to my office and wanted to know all about and I was then working for what the name changed, but the name now is the Drug Policy Alliance. And I told him what we do. And it's all about public education, really, and legal avenues. And he said, "I love this issue. I love this issue. This is going to be my issue."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Great. Ooh, so good to hear, Gavin." I said, "A lot of politicians say that, and then they take the heat and they
Mm-hmm.
backslide."
Yeah.
He says, "I'm not going to backslide." I said, "Yeah, okay." Cynical as I was about the whole thing. But
Justifiably so.
yeah, but then over the years, and I was hosting forums and conferences, and I invited him as a speaker, as a supervisor. I invited him to participate, and he always said yes. And he would say to me, "You see, I'm not backsliding." And so that's my relationship. And then I worked with him on the legalization of marijuana back in
Mm-hmm.
2016. And I was part of his Blue Ribbon Commission on on marijuana policy. And so I've been in communication with him ever since. And with Prop 64, legalization of marijuana,
Right. In
which
California.
we all thought that was it. Once
Oh, I
you,
remember those days.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and it
What year was
for
that? 2016, did you say?
2016,
Right. Okay.
yeah. When that passed, I said to him, "You really haven't backslided. That's great." So that's my relationship with him.
You were in drug policy and had a hand in all of these regulatory measures, et cetera. Then you moved into education. And I think it was because you told me, as your kids became teenagers, your
Mhm.
interest expanded from drug policy into drug education. And you wrote a letter to your then 14-year-old son that was published in the San Francisco Chronicle,
Mhm.
which had quite an impact. And then the result of that was the creation of the Safety First program. So let's talk about that. I remember reading that letter, and I think that's when I first found out about you. That's when you came on my radar.
Yeah, again, 1998 was a, pretty big year, I guess, at least for me in drug policy. I had gone to I had attended a board meeting of the San Francisco Chronicle with my two colleagues, Dan Abrahamson and Ethan Nadelman,
Mhm.
and they were talking to the board about the importance of harm reduction. And because that was a huge focus for us.
Right.
Um, bringing a harm reduction perspective to San Francisco and treatment in San Francisco, which we did. And so one of the Chronicle board members said, okay, all this, to all three of us, all this harm reduction, that all sounds great, sounds perfect. And then he looks at me, because I'm the only woman in the room, and says, but what about the kids? So I quickly, because you don't really have that much time, I quickly laid out my perspective, which what does harm reduction look like when it comes to kids?
Right.
And I said, the main thing is the drug education that they've been getting, like DARE, isn't working to prevent drug use. But so instead, I think kids should know everything they can, learn everything they can about drugs. They're going to make their own decisions and learn how to make wise decisions, safety-oriented decisions, so that if they choose to use substances, they do it in a way that won't harm them. So that was what I said. And the guy says, okay, he says, if you will write that as a letter to your 14-year-old son, it turned out he knew I had a 14-year-old son because his 14-year-old son played soccer with mine. So this is how things work, really. And so I crafted a letter to my son, Johnny, and in which I said, you're going to have to navigate this issue. And remember, I was living in San Francisco, and he happened to be going to a very nice private school, which was 1 block from the corner of Haight and Ashbury. So access was not, and they had an open campus. And
Right.
so access was not going to be an issue. But basically what I said to him was, you're going to have to navigate this. These things are going to be available. You need to learn. And basically what I had said to the board, learn everything you can. And remember that we are here to help you and not to facilitate. But if you find yourself in trouble, call. Not just us or any of our good friends, because we kind of had an agreement that way. So that was that letter. And after it came out, I got all kinds of responses from parents who said, this is what I have been doing too. But you had to be pretty underground on this stuff then.
Right. Oh,
If
yeah.
you weren't, if you weren't aligned with Nancy Reagan and
Hmm.
just say no, what are you saying? Are you saying just say yes? No, we're not saying just
Right.
say. We would say, as many other organizations now have embraced this, just say no, KNOW. And so that's how I got involved in drug education, along with it was just part of what I was doing at DPA. It wasn't a separate thing. And it seemed to resonate for so many people. So started writing booklets, a series of booklets. Now there's 7 of them that kind of flushed out what the letter said. What does that mean? And so that was what my focus was at that time.
And you created, it was a bright blue booklet, Safety First. I picked it up at when I first, met you or came across your work. I picked it up, and so I might even have one in my files still. I mean, this was like some of the earliest information of how to keep yourself safe in this world of exploring these molecules.
Hmm.
And then you went deeper. Didn't you do little pamphlets or postcards or something about each drug?
Well, we created a website, of course, and on the website was information about each drug. We were also at that time, we got requests for a curriculum
Hmm.
because when I started this, it was all about getting into schools with this stuff.
Right.
Forget it.
No.
Just forget it.
Right.
So, okay. So how do I reach an important audience?
Right.
And so I focused on parents.
Hmm.
And so those booklets were written as a parent for other parents,
Got it.
encouraging parents to learn as much as they could and about the various substances and what it
Mhm.
all meant, and encouraging them to try to have open, honest conversations with their kids. And because they were going to be, that's who was going to be doing drug education,
Mhm.
was, as I called them, enlightened parents. Schools weren't. They were sticking with DARE.
Right.
So, but we got requests for a curriculum, a safety first curriculum that we did put together and covered all of the drugs, 15 lessons, and piloted it in New York and San Francisco and evaluated that
Hmm.
program.
Hmm.
And so that's
And about what year is this?
by then it's maybe 2007,
Yeah.
2008.
Hey, fellow explorers. Thoughtful planning and preparation is the foundation of any successful psychedelic journey. And if something does go wrong, knowing how to navigate that difficult space is essential. That's why I wrote my psychedelic safety guide, including what to do when things go wrong. It's filled with tips and tools for keeping you and your friends as safe as possible. You'll find it at our website, psychedelicdivas.com. Please go get it, read it, and share it. The more we all know, the safer we can keep each other. So, from your research and policy perspective, what can you tell us about the actual results of the DARE program? I know a lot of our listeners went through DARE at school, but what does the actual research say about the results of that program?
Most of the research that we accessed indicated that DARE was making no difference for a lot of kids, no difference at all. And in fact, what the media was telling kids about drugs became a joke. There's plenty of people who went through DARE now. They're adults. What'd they learn? And a few of them, it stuck with them. Okay. And they're very kind of worried about drugs and stuff. But many of them will say they don't remember it at all. They don't remember what they learned, or it was a joke.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that,
Well, I mean, I was older. I am older than Dare, so I didn't have that in my schooling. My drug education was Art Linkletter's daughter, supposedly as a result of
right.
LSD jumping out the window saying I can fly. Now that actually is an untrue story.
Yeah.
I mean, she did die. She did jump out a window, but she was not on LSD at the time, and she had been using LSD, but they wanted to use they. It was a made up story, but I'll tell you, it had an impact on me. Took me a long time. I didn't try LSD till I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
So I guess to some extent, scare tactics work. I'm not recommending them, but
They work for some people.
well, they worked until I tried it and realized that everything that they had said was a lie. And then now so then it was a and here we are, and I have Psychedelic Divas podcast.
Yeah. That's true.
So you created this safety first program, but it did get a lot of pushback, and you were personally attacked for your perspective on teaching kids harm reduction rather than total abstinence. You even appeared on Bill O'Reilly to defend harm reduction. So, what was the impact on you of those negative attacks?
Keep going. That's all you can do. I mean, of course, I was attacked, not as much as you might think.
It was early days. And right now, it would
Mhm.
be pretty bad.
Yeah,
If it was that time with the amount of access that everybody has, to the internet, et cetera.
right, exactly. You have to remember these years, those early years of drug policy and even drug research was pre-computers.
Right.
So
Well, not
so
computers, but pre-internet.
Pre-internet,
Yeah.
right.
I know you and I are like, wait, when did we first when was our first computer? When did we first go online? I mean, like, we're trying, we're dating back into the 90s and, I mean, both of us grew up on typewriters.
Yes, we did.
I had an electric one.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a big breakthrough, the
Yes, it
electric one.
was. But I read one of those attacks, one of the guys, when I was, Googling you, and his perspective was that kids should be drug tested in
Mm.
schools, and that is how you maintain abstinence.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so was
The,
that actually ever a consideration?
oh, well, that was another project that we worked on, kind of countering the movement for drug testing
Hmm.
in schools. And so we came out working with the ACLU on this one. And basically, I think what happened was that they sort of backed off on that one, because it just it just would drive kids away. And if you're trying to engage young people, what the last thing you want is for them to turn you off. And that's the whole push for drug testing was that. And and not only that, they were not drug testing for alcohol. And that was the most widely used and most dangerous drug of all. So the whole thing was hypocritical and
Right.
absurd.
Absurd. And I'm so glad that you had a hand in squashing that. I can't even imagine going to school and having to be drug tested. But okay, so all of these years of research and policy and then education. So, you had retired a bit from the drug world, and then Michael Pollan's book came out, and you were invited to speak at the 2019 Esalen Conference on Psychedelics and Integration, which I attended.
Mhm.
And you decided to come above ground at that conference and to talk about your personal use. So tell us about that decision.
First off, remember, it's Esalen.
Right.
So it seemed like, I mean, Esalen was, and I said it at the time, I said, we are in a bubble, inside of a bubble, which is the Bay Area, basically, inside of another bubble, California. And so our perspective is probably not widely shared, and nor is it now. Um, but at that point, I had retired from running the San Francisco office of DPA, and I was finished with research. And I thought, I'm just going to come out here. And so, and I had a lot of fun with it. I really did. Just talking about my own personal relationship with MDMA. And
So share a little bit about that.
well, for me, MDMA, anyone who's taken it knows, I think, or most people would agree, that your first uh, experience is the best. It's the best one. And I trying to figure, why is that? And by that time, remember, we had we had already finished the MDMA study that NIDA funded us for. So we had a lot of data.
Right. So
Um,
your first time was in 1985 while it was still legal.
yes, for a minute, and then it
Right.
wasn't.
Right.
Pretty soon after that. But by the time the Esalen conference came around in 2019, this is many years later, I had what were they going to do to me? What what was going to happen? I wasn't applying for any more grants. Um, and I honestly, my general sense of protection, because I am a privileged person. I know that. So I just talked about my experience with MDMA and how, because I think that first one, you're so surprised. And wow, didn't know I could feel this good. And so that's how I started that talk and went into it, and also included some cautions, with MDMA. Be careful when you start in with true confessions, because they seem so very right at the time, right? But then there's the next day. You say, is that what you said to me? Is that what I said? God.
Brene Brown
Anyway,
calls that a vulnerability hangover.
yeah. Well, anyway, so that was that talk. It was all about my own relationship with MDMA, which has basically been fine all these years.
So MDMA was not your first foray into the drug world, though. You were present for the Summer of Love, 1967. Although I don't. Well, tell us about. I don't think you were deeply involved in the
No,
Hayward scene.
no. In I grew up on the peninsula in San Francisco, a suburb, and it's 1967. I was in between freshman and sophomore year of college by then. And a friend, we went up, I remember it was some kind of hillside somewhere near Palo Alto. And she introduced me to cannabis. But who knew that word then? Just let's call it what it was, marijuana. And I liked it. It was fine, and continued to, use it occasionally at that time. It was so underground then. It really was. It
Yeah,
just, it's not like, I felt like I was going to get arrested, but I was careful. I was careful. And so,
well,
yeah,
you could have gotten arrested in those days.
yeah,
So just
the police are not looking for someone who looks like me.
no, and that's our privilege, right? But you just
Yeah,
for historical context, you could have gotten arrested.
sure. Yes, it was seriously illegal then.
Yes.
So,
So you're hiding the smell, all of those things.
oh yeah, yeah, and there was, as far as I knew, there was only smoked marijuana. It's not like now, where there's
No.
various forms of it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe people were putting some in brownies or
Oh,
whatever,
the
but
brownie thing.
yes.
Yes, that's true. That is true. So, yeah.
And
So
then from pot, you ventured into what was next?
I think it was either psilocybin or one that you don't see very much anymore. Can't remember what it was.
Mescaline
Maybe
or
mescaline. It was
mescaline?
mescaline.
There's a lot of mescaline in the late 60s, definitely. More
Well,
more
this
than now.
would have been 1970.
Okay.
It was my 22nd birthday. We drove up to Point Reyes and took mescaline, and it was great. I mean, I thought, okay, yeah, and it connected me to the universe then, and it was wonderful. So yeah, and then occasionally, um, we would have, little ceremonies, and also later. So that was cannabis, mescaline, I think some LSD in there too, but not that often, and
Right.
always in a very controlled way.
I wanted to ask about this because, I often ask that question on this podcast, but also because, during all this time you were a NIDA researcher.
Yeah,
So
well, we
that's the
didn't.
aspect that I like, that juxtaposition.
Yeah, we didn't put that information in grant proposals.
Really?
Uh, yeah, I mean, you could talk about participant observation, and what that might mean,
Uh-huh.
but it was mostly we used the word ethnography, and so yeah, it didn't hurt that my appearance is so very conventional, much to my own chagrin. Uh-huh. but it just is. So just it's balancing those two things
Hmm. Yeah.
is
But
yeah.
that's what's so awesome now about, from 2019 on, you coming above ground, your very conventionality, your age, all of those things.
Mhm.
Um, it's sort of a deeper gravitas to, yes, NIDA researcher have been doing these medicines, and yes,
Yeah,
I have found them to be useful and pleasurable.
yeah. Well, and now I'm learning so much more about psychedelic medicine,
Hmm.
having just re-entered that that world,
Well,
because that
let's talk about that. You're currently partnered with Kristen Nash. She's one of the founders of Before You Trip,
yeah,
from the Coalition of Psychedelic Safety and Education, which is a nonprofit organization
right.
dedicated to enhancing public education around responsible psychedelic use.
Mm-hmm.
What's I found compelling about this organization is twofold. So the founders, including Kristen, they've all had personal losses of family members due to adverse events involving psychedelics.
Right.
And they all went on to create this educational program in order to try to not just say don't do it, but to say, wait, let's provide the proper safety and awareness and cautions that are so needed. And so they created this incredible resource that you help them with. It's called Before You Trip. It's
Mm-hmm.
beforeyoutrip.org. Is that right?
Yeah.
It'll be in the show notes, everybody. But Before
Good.
You Trip, and it provides safety information and how about psychedelic use, and it's targeted at Gen Z. But
Yeah.
I mean, I looked it over, and I'm going to say it's useful for anyone. So tell us about that work and its message.
So I met Kristen about a few years after she lost her son. And she was looking to improve conditions for Gen Z. Her son was in college at the time. And we found each other through Safety First. And I really liked her perspective. She was a harm reductionist, and which is not
With just
easy.
a heart-wrenching
Yeah,
story
yeah,
and
yeah,
perspective.
yeah. Any store, any person who's lost a child to anything, but to to drug use or related, drug use and are related to drug use. So that's when I started to work with her on this. I don't know if you could call it a curriculum. It's more of a program that's online
Hmm.
and drawing also from the curriculum that we had created at DPA for high schools. They're very different in terms of with high school, you have a captive audience. They're kids and they're in school. And so you have health education in schools. Not so with Gen Z. So it has to be it's very modern and very techy. And so because that's how you would reach them through the influencers and those kinds of sources. So I started working with her and have found it really rewarding. So far, the program is doing great, and now we're trying to figure out how to get it out there
Yeah.
more widely.
It's such a valuable resource. Highly recommend that y'all check it out. And as I said, it'll be in the show notes. But
Mhm.
it's really well done. I want to honor the work that went into it and
Thank you.
the updated nature of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's current.
Yes,
It's current.
Marsha, thank you so much for coming on Psychedelic Divas. It's been
Thank
so
you.
much fun reconnecting with you and getting to know you better.
Yeah, Carla, I feel the same way. Thank you so much for having me on this visual podcast.
That's right, y'all. We're on YouTube. Okay, we put makeup on for you, so you can check us out there. I want to say this: I put a lot of effort into doing this on YouTube, and my numbers on YouTube are really small. and I have a lot more listeners, in the podcast world. So if you're going to, but I was told that YouTube is the number one purveyor of podcasts and that it demanded video. So, you know, we got dressed up for you. We put on makeup, and I'm just saying, y'all should check us out on YouTube. I
Thank
need
you,
my numbers
Carla.
too. I need bigger numbers there. So,
Okay. Thanks, Carla. I'd appreciate it a lot.
all right. Well, I'm so pleased to have a chance to honor the decades of dedicated work you've given to the world of drug research, policy, and education. I mean, I would say the world of psychedelics owes you a great debt, and I'm
Thank you.
glad to be able to highlight that.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, I also want to thank you all for listening and for spreading the word about this podcast. If you found this valuable in any way, please do give us a 5-star rating or a thumbs up wherever you're listening. That would be YouTube. And if you want to be part of the ongoing journey with me, please consider going to psychedelicdivas.com and sharing your email address. Believe me, I am not a fan of email, so I promise not to spam you, but I will give you my psychedelic safety guide, including what to do when things go wrong. And it's also the most reliable way to stay in touch with me since social media sometimes pulls down psychedelic accounts. So
Mm.
thanks for considering joining my mailing list. Thank you again, Marsha,
Thank you, Carla.
and wishing everyone a safe journey. I so appreciate this opportunity to grow together.
Thank you.